The minute you're working with the government, you're dealing with bureaucracy. You're dealing with time lags. You're dealing with rigidity. You're dealing with a slow pace. Bob Simon, American television correspondent for CBS News. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. We are back at it again. Now, you might be thinking like, DL, today is, MLK Day. Are you going to talk about that? No. DL, today is the president's inauguration. You going to talk about that? Not really. Today's bill review day. And I'm technically not doing a bill review per se, not in the legislative sense. We're going to be talking about the FDA and their ban on red dye number 3. Last week, MAHA, Make American Healthy Again supporters, they celebrated red dye number 3 being banned by the FDA. Now, some of them mistakenly gave credit to incoming President Donald Trump and Health and Human Services Secretary nominee RFK Jr. Left out of any mention, though, is Americans' favorite villain, Governor Gavin Newsom. That's right. You heard me. You can, if you're excited about the ban on red dye number 3, you can give Gavin Newsom a pat on the back and maybe bureaucracy, because that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. So on January 15th, the FDA announced that they were revoking the authorization of the use of red dye number 3, or as reported, banning the additive for use in food. So basically, they had to authorize it. So how does this, like, what's the story behind this? Why would I suggest that somebody is awful, a villain like Gavin Newsom should be more celebrated than, say, Donald Trump or RFK Jr., who both ran on this idea of making America more healthy? Well, let's start with the FDA announcement. We'll pull that up on the screen. We're going to take a look and we're going to go through some of this material and we're going to kind of we're going to unpack the history and kind of how we got to where we are today with this. So let me put this up on the screen. Let's see. Where are you here? Give me a second. Why is it I'm being uncooperative? Oh, yeah. Let me go here. I had almost everything set up. But the one thing that I didn't have set up was the one thing that I needed right away. So give me just a second. Let me get this up on the screen. I think there we go. Sort of. Let's see how this looks. Okay, so we're going to give me just a second as we there we go. I think that's going to work well enough. I apologize for the delay, but we will get to it here. So give me just a moment. We'll get it up on the screen. All right. So here we go. So this is the FDA to revoke authorization for the use of red number 3 in food and ingested drugs. So hopefully you guys can see this up on the screen well enough. If not, don't worry. I'm going to read to you the important parts here. So it says constituent update, January 15th, 2025. The FDA is revoking the authorization for the use of FDNC red number 3. That's its official name, by the way. And I highlighted here as a matter of law. We'll get into that. Based on the Delaney Clause of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, FDNC Act. The FDA is amending its color additive regulations to no longer allow for the use of FDNC red number 3 in food and ingested drugs in response to a 2022 color additive petition. So this is on the basis of a petition. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit. and see if we can't set this up just so that so that you can read it, because I'm looking and I see that it doesn't really fit so well. It doesn't really show so well on the screen with the tiny little print. So we will expand that a little bit. All right, there we go. Much more betterer. Okay, the petition requested the agency review whether the Delaney Clause applied and cited, among the other data and information, to studies that showed cancer in laboratory male rats exposed to high levels of FDNC red number 3 due to a rat-specific hormonal mechanism. The way that FDNC, I want to stop and point out, a lot of people will talk about hormones being shifted or modified or impacted in some way because of some of our additives. So just want to point out that is actually true. There can be hormone impacts based on the things that we eat. Let's continue on here. The way that FDNC red number 3 causes cancer in male rats does not occur in humans. Oh, okay. So the mechanism doesn't apply to humans like the same way. And from my understanding, the reason that we look at rats a lot is because rats are one of the creatures that that apparently the biological mechanisms kind of are shared in a sense. Like things that happen to rats are things that in many cases can happen to humans in a similar fashion. So that's why we use rats. And probably also because, like most people are like, ew, rats. Anyway, relevant exposure levels to FDNC red number 3 for humans are typically much lower than those that cause effects shown in male rats. Studies in other animals and in humans did not show those effects. Claims that the use of FDNC red number 3 in food and ingested drugs puts people at risk are not supported by the available scientific information. So let's just, at the top here, this paragraph, it said, as a matter of law. So we're going to get into that. But then they go on in their first paragraph and they're like, the current science actually doesn't support that red dye number 3 causes cancer, but we're going to revoke it anyway because the law says so. So this is very interesting. All right, we get down. The Delaney Clause, enacted in 1960 as part of the Color Additives Amendment to the FD&C Act, prohibits FDA authorization of a food additive or color additive if it has been found to induce cancer in humans or animals. Now, if you do research on the Delaney Clause, you're going to find, and we're going to, I'll put up some information here in a little bit, but you're going to find that there's actually it's questionable whether or not this Delaney Clause needs to be updated or even scrapped. There are researchers out there that look and say, hey, the Delaney Clause, it's too rigid and it's not suitable. It might have been good back in the time that it was implemented, but today we have much better understanding of things. And, there's an argument to be made that the Delaney Clause needs to just go away. This is not the first time the agency revoked an authorization based on the Delaney Clause. For example, in 2018, the FDA revoked the authorization for certain synthetic flavors based on the Delaney Clause in response to a food additive petition. Right. So, like, they keep revoking things based on the law, not the science. Now, I won't say that anything that gets revoked is not based on science. I'm just saying there are a number of things that get revoked, and the reason is the letter of the law, not science. They're not looking and saying, wow, the science tells us this thing, we better act. They look and they say, here's what the science says, here's what the law says. Well, science doesn't really say that it's a dangerous thing, but the law says that we have to get rid of it. So therefore we will. That's how it works. All right, let's see. We're almost done here. The FDNC red number 3 is a synthetic food dye that gives foods and drinks a bright cherry color. The FDA estimates that FDNC red number 3 is not as widely used in food and drugs when compared to other certified colors. Oh, so all of this celebration from the MAHA crowd, and it's not even really used that often. All right. And then it says when compared to other certified colors based on information in third-party food product labeling databases, food manufacturers' websites, and other public information, and the FDA's certification data. Okay, so like, look, all these sources, including the company's own documents, their labeling databases, their websites, their public information, not even like they're not really using it that much. Um, it's primarily been used. It's been primarily used in certain food products such as candy, cakes, and cupcakes. Cup, candy, cakes, and cupcakes, cookies, frozen desserts, and frostings and icings, as well as certain ingested drugs. So, like, basically, if you don't have a sweet tooth, you kind of don't really need to worry so much about red dye number three. Manufacturers who use FD&C red number three in food and ingested drugs will have until January 15, 2027 or January 18, 2028, respectively, to reformulate their products. Other countries still currently allow for certain uses of red number three, called erythrocene in other countries. However, foods imported to the US must comply with the US requirements. Okay, so now it's 2027. Like today, we're in 2025. We just started 2025, like 2 weeks ago. And now we're talking like, okay, well, in 2 years, um, they will like literally almost 2 years to the date. In 2 years, they will have to have it removed. So you've got 2 more years that you could be consuming red dye number three. All right, so this is the FDA revoking their authorization for this particular additive. Now, what really makes this funny, let me get myself back up on the screen here. What makes this really really funny is that if you look on social media, like, people were really excited about this. This really got them going. In fact, let's take a look and let's just see some of the comments that we have from people out there. So here we go. All right. So MAHA is winning. Trump and RFK Jr. haven't even taken office yet, but the FDA just banned artificial dye red 3 from food products and drugs. Exciting. Breaking, the FDA just banned red number 3, the toxic dye hiding in your candy, drinks, and snacks. Over decades after decades of silence, cries from the MAHA movement finally pushed this poison off our shelves. Are we witnessing the RFK Jr. effect? Well, I can answer that now. The answer is no, you are not. And I will show it to you with proof. I come bearing receipts, folks. Okay, what else we got? There you have it. FDA bans red number 3 in food. Europe has banned it for years. Not entirely. The MAHA effect, that doesn't exist, taking place before Trump's inauguration and the incoming FDA admin under Marty McCary. Don't tell me for a second this would have happened without MAHA. Oh, I'll tell you. And I will show you. Breaking, the FDA is banning red dye 3, citing cancer concerns. RFK effect. This is so funny. Funny how they announced this week the banning of red dye number 3 30 years after finding out it causes cancer, with another 2 years before it's off the shelves. If it weren't for MAHA and RFK Jr., would the FDA continue to postpone its ban? Probably not. Or no, they probably wouldn't. But again, MAHA and RFK Jr. had very little to do with this, if anything whatsoever. Let's see. RFK Jr. victory. FDA announces ban on red dye 3 as cancer risk revealed. RFK was right. MAHA. Let's see. The red dye number 3 is already removed from our foods. Thanks, RFK. MAHA. First Five Guys, now Steak and Shake. MAHA. Oh, and thanks for banning red dye number 3, FDA. I'm sure this is totally unrelated to RFK being about 2 inches away from being completely up your ass. Well, you're right. It is unrelated. Don't worry, folks. I will show you. As of 16 January, red dye 3 is banned. What a great start. RFK Jr. isn't even confirmed yet, but is leading the charge for MAHA. Thank you. Leading the charge. He is leading a charge, like publicly. I will give him that. And that has been a centerpiece of his when he was campaigning and his efforts. So I'm not going to deny that. We're only denying did he play a role in this particular additive being banned, or more technically speaking, revoked its authorization? Red dye number 3, banned at last. Finally, some good news for our health. The FDA has officially banned red dye number 3, a synthetic food coloring linked to cancer in animal studies. This victory is thanks to years of advocacy by groups like MAHA and individuals like RFK Jr., who have been raising awareness about the dangers of artificial food additives. Okay, so this one actually was a little bit more accurate because they said like MAHA and like RFK Jr., right? So, like, not them specifically, but groups similar to him. All right, let's see. We got 2 more here. I think red dye 3, getting axed, tells us all we need to know. Oh, no, it does not. They know they've been making us sick, and RFK Jr. is about to expose it and fix it. Look, all I'm going to say is if you were eating a healthy diet and limiting your consumption of sweets and snacks and, like things that have food coloring, like if you like ate the perimeter, vegetables and meat, some fruit, you made it, kind of fresh, you could have avoided all this all by yourself. Not that hard, folks. Nothing to expose here. All right. The FDA just banned red 3 dye in foods over cancer concerns. This comes 35 years after it was banned in cosmetics. RFK Jr. vindicated. Well, maybe not quite vindicated. Okay. All right. So if you recall, the FDA's own website noted that they revoked authorization based on a 2022 petition, which outlines a little history of the additive. So now we're gonna take a look at some of this history here, and we're gonna see um, just and we're this is kind of like my bill part of the bill review. We're gonna look at the petition, and what I want. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. It's like 60 some pages, but I'm gonna go through the history of this so that you understand why I would make the claim that I am with this episode, that FDA's food ban is not a good idea, right? Like, it's not that I'm saying that red dye 3 is a good additive and that we should continue to use it. I'm just saying that their ban on it, or they're revoking the authorization, that's a problem. And I'm gonna show it to you why. So let's pull this up on the screen here. All right. The first thing that you're gonna see at the very top is a list of entities. So remember that one tweet where somebody was like, hey, groups like MAHA, these are those groups: Center for Science in the Public Interest, Breast Cancer Prevention Partners, Center for Environmental Health, Center for Food Safety, Chef Ann Foundation, Children's Advocacy Institute, Consumer Federation of America, Consumer Reports, Defend Our Health, Environmental Defense Fund, Environmental Working Group, Feingold Association of the United States, Food and Water Watch, Healthy Babies, Bright Futures, Lifetime Foundation, Moms Rising, Prevention Institute, Public Citizen, Public Health Institute, Public Interest Research Group, Real Food for Kids, Lisa Y. Lefferts, Linda S. Birnbaum, and Philip J. Andergan, I think. Landegran. Like, those are the people that are signed on officially to this petition. You notice what's missing, right? There's nothing in there about MAHA. There's nothing in about RFK Jr., right? They're not listed on here. There were individual names, but and maybe he had interaction with some of these groups. I didn't look them all up. But the point being, you had all these groups that were already out there checking out our food supply saying, I'm not so sure we should be having this in the food. So here's where it gets really interesting, because we're going to go through this petition, just read a couple excerpts from a few pages. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of think about this timeline for a second. So let's scroll on down here. Let's see. We want to go to page 3. So let's go over to page 3 here real quick. All right. So background. This is great. All right. FDNC, red number 3, is a color additive currently approved for use in food generally, including dietary supplements and in ingested drugs. This color additive was first approved in 1907. Okay. 1907. Like, think about that. That's a long time, for use in food as erythrocene. And then in 1939 as FD&C red number 3 for use in food, drugs, and cosmetics. So it had, had a name change. Um, all right, so let's continue on. In 1960, in response to the Color Additives Amendment, which requires the FDA to determine whether color additives were, quote, suitable and safe, end quote, for a given use, the FDA placed FD&C Red Number 3 on a provisional list for all uses with tentative approval for all uses pending evaluation by the FDA. In 1969, in response to a 1968 petition from the Certified Color Industry Committee, the FDA permanently listed FD&C Red Number 3 for use in food, including dietary supplements and ingested drugs, based on studies available at the time. So in 1969, they put it permanently as acceptable in your foods. 1969. Later in 1969, the Toilet Goods Association submitted a color additive petition requesting permanent listing of FD&C Red Number 3 for coloring cosmetics, including lipsticks and other ingested cosmetics and externally applied drugs. Thus, although the use of FD&C Red Number 3 for use in food and ingested drugs was permanently listed in 1969, the external drug uses, all cosmetic uses, and all uses of lakes of FD&C Red Number 3 remained provisionally listed pending on an FDA decision, while petitioners conducted safety tests appropriate for external use. So what they're saying is like, look, Red Number 3, it was approved for your food, but then when this other group said, "Hey, can we have an approval for cosmetics? Can we have approval for external use?" The FDA said, "Well, we'll provisionally set you up, but then we're gonna have to go through and determine whether or not, this is an acceptable additive for the products that you're selling." Right? So, like, they paid no mind. There's no mechanism that said, "Hey, if it's not good for food, then maybe it's not good for external use." If it's not good internally, maybe in external is not so good. And look, let's be fair. There are plenty of things out there that are acceptable. Lotion is supposed to be put on your skin, but you are not supposed to eat it. So just because one just because it's permanently listed in food doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be for cosmetics. And just because they deny it for one doesn't necessarily mean it should be denied for the other. Okay. All right. Let's keep continuing on here. Then in 1977, FDA published revised provisional listing regulations requiring new chronic toxicity studies in 31 color additives, including FD&C Red Number 3, as a condition of their continued provisional listing. So it's still in this provisional status 8 years later. FDA required the new chronic toxicity studies because previously submitted studies were deficient in several respects. Okay, fair enough. Like, okay, hey, guess what? We've learned new things. Turns out this was insufficient. We need to do it this way now. Okay, that's fair. That's reasonable. As you learn new information, you should adjust. The FDA postponed the closing date for the provisional listing of FD&C Red Number 3 until 1981 to allow for studies to be completed. Okay, so it was provisionally permitted from 1969 until at least 1981. Okay, that's what, 12 years? Like, is that right? Am I doing my math right on there? Let's see. 69 plus 1 would be 70, and then 10 to 80 and 81. Okay, so yeah, 12 years. So 12 years, this was provisionally listed. And during that 12 years, they were researching it, for starters, to determine. And then number two, they updated their requirements. So if it had been bad, you got 12 years of use. That's kind of weird. All right. Over the years, the closing date for the provisional listing would be extended many times to allow for studies and reviews to be performed, completed, or evaluated. So they just keep extending it. In the early 1980s, the new chronic studies became available and indicated that FD&C Red Number 3 could cause cancer in lab rats. While reviewing that evidence and collecting additional data, including data intended to determine if the mechanism for the observed cancers was an iodine excess from the sodium iodide constituent of FDNC red number 3. Okay, that's the technical details. The FDA allowed FDNC red number 3 to continue to be used provisionally in cosmetics and externally applied drugs and in lake form in food, drugs, and cosmetics, reasoning that, quote, public exposure to this color additive results largely from its permanent listed uses in food and ingested drugs. So they were like, well, we permitted it in food. And since we're permitting it in the food, we're going to provisionally permit it in cosmetics, which kind of makes sense in a way. Like, hey, it's good here. So that must mean something. So therefore, we're going to allow it here until we do the proper research. But the problem I see here is that they're doing research to determine, can this cause cancer? Is this a problem? So the way I look at it, if you need to do that research, maybe maybe what should happen is you provisionally delist it and say, no, we're not going to allow it because we need to study this, right? We need to confirm that it doesn't cause this thing. And then once we confirm that with the knowledge that we have, then we will list it. But no, they did it backwards. And maybe there's a rationale for it, right? Like there might be some document somewhere that outlines why they're going through that particular process. All right. Let's see. In 1984, FDA's acting commissioner, Mark Novich, wrote that FDNC red number 3 was, quote, of greatest public health concern. The agency should not knowingly allow continued exposure of the public to a provisionally listed color additive that has clearly been shown to induce cancer while questions of mechanism are explored, end quote. So in 1984, odd year, 1984, their acting commissioner said, you know what? We know this thing causes cancer. What we don't know is how, right? Like it's been shown that it does it, but we don't know how. And this would explain the whole rats, like, okay, what's the mechanism that's leading to this? Does that mechanism translate into humans? Because maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's really bad for rats. You know, there are some things that humans can consume that animals should not. For instance, we have a new dog, and I pulled up a video on YouTube to let my son watch, and it was basically like, you know, the ins and outs of having a new dog, and they were explaining like, here are some foods that you should never give a dog because it can make them really, really sick. And you know what one of them was? Chocolate. Chocolate dogs can't have. So the fact that an animal can't have it doesn't necessarily mean that a human can't have it, but it might. Like if you give a dog bleach, like you're going to poison and potentially kill the dog in the same way you would with a human. So like some things do translate, but some do not. And right now we've got 1984, right? They're still looking at it while it's provisionally used. And even their acting commissioner said, look, we've got some information that suggests we probably shouldn't be having this. But no, they continued on. Because in 1990, after providing numerous extensions of the provisional listing and a lengthy period of time to amass the scientific data to establish data safety, the FDA concluded FDNC red number 3 is an animal carcinogen when administered in the diet. And the studies showing FDNC red number 3 to be a carcinogen when ingested are relevant and appropriate to the evaluation of the safety of this color additive for non-ingested uses. Okay, so the FDA tells us in 1990 it causes cancer in animals if they eat it. And they further said that it's when it just the where is I reading it? The studies showing FDN when ingested are relevant and appropriate to the evaluation of the safety of this for non-ingested. So they said, look, it causes cancer when it's ingested, and these studies are relevant to external use as well. In fact, the agency concluded that the evidence was robust enough to, quote, firmly establish that FDNC red number 3 causes thyroid cancer in male rats. As a result, it terminated the provisional listings of FDNC red number 3 for use in cosmetics, including lipsticks and other ingested cosmetics and externally applied drugs, and for all uses of the lakes of, I don't know what that means, FD&C Red number 3 in 1990. Illogically, all these external uses were deemed unsafe. Ingested uses continued. So the FDA formally acknowledged in 1990 that rats who ingest red number 3, well, they could get cancer. And then they said the data is strong enough that it applies to external uses as well. So therefore, we are revoking this provisional use. You're no longer allowed to use it in your makeups and things along that line, right? Like, how crazy is this? I think it's it. Yeah, that's everything that I've got. So we're not going to read the rest of it. Just wanted to kind of give you a sense of the history. In 1907, approved as erythrocin, changed its name in 1939, put on a provisional list in 1960. A petition in 1968 was submitted and said, "Hey, yo, can we get it for external uses?" 1969, permanently listed for use in food. Later that year, another petition for permanent use in cosmetics. I said that wrong. In 1968, the petition was for food for ingested uses. So in 1968, you had the provisional, you had the uh, petition submitted for ingestion for food for consumption. In 1969, it was permanently listed for food. 1969, later that year, they were there was a somebody submitted a petition for cosmetics. 1977, they updated the provisional listing, including red dye number 3 for cosmetics, and then postponed the provisional closing to 1981. So they basically said, "Oh, we got some new information. You're going to have to start all over. So we'll give you to 1981." And then some in the 1980s, we determined that, hey, this causes cancer in rats. 1990, the FDA finally said, you know what? 21 years after the first petition for permanent listing, yeah, we're going to say no. 21 years. So people got to, in some way, consume this product for 21 years while the FDA was, making a decision about cancer. In other words, red dye number 3 has had a very long bureaucratic history with the FDA regarding authorization. Like, that's bureaucracy at its finest. Over 20 years just to determine, hey, is this healthy? You know what? Turns out it's not. Not a good idea. But then they left it in the food, which I would say in some ways is more important. More important than whether you put it on your skin. Like, people are eating this. It's in candy. We go to the store and we're like, ooh, that candy looks good. It's so bright red. Let me have some of that. And we start eating it, right? Like in other foods, like, man, look at those cupcakes. That's a really bright red icing. That's delicious looking. I'm gonna eat it on the way home. All right. Like, this is insane. This is like, you cannot demonstrate any better level of bureaucracy than right here. All right, let's take a look at some comments here. Let's see what we've got going on. So let's take a peek, and I'm going to check all my. I'm going to check all the comments, from all the sources that I can. But let's see what we've got here. Let's see. Good morning, Liberty champions. That Liberty lady says yes. Good morning indeed. Joe Hanush says banning colors on MLK Jr. Day, for shame. Banning colors. You guys are killing me. Biden is the most MAHA, almost said Baja. Biden is the most MAHA president ever. Let's see. If you want food dyes out of your food, buy and eat as much unprocessed whole food as possible. Food in a box has dyes, emulsifiers, and a shelf life additives. Indeed. Shop the perimeter. Go look at the perimeter and find. Here's a good rule of thumb. There's a couple good rules of thumb. Number 1, shop the perimeter. Number 2, if it's the sooner it spoils, the better it is for you, right? Like, the longer it can last on the shelf, like a Twinkie, the less healthy it is for you, as a rule of thumb. Let's see. What are some other good advice? Oh, I love this one from Michael Pollan. He's a writer, I believe. He said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I said mostly plants, people. You can still eat meat. Don't come and try to crucify me. Okay. But think about that. Eat food, like real food, not too much. So don't overindulge. Mostly plants. So grab that plate, throw 70, make sure 75% of it is some plants. You know, there's plenty of plants out there that you can find tasty. Don't make excuses. Have a sweet potato. Okay. And then throw some meat on there. Call it a day. Get some spices and some herbs. And man, look at you. You're Maha all by yourself. No government needed. No bureaucracy to worry about. Right there. All right. Let's see what else. New Maha law. Center aisles in grocery stores banned and replaced with gym equipment. I don't know. Like, on one hand, Joe, I would say I'm not a big fan of bans and, impositions, but that's kind of attractive. Like, I don't know. I might be able to get behind that one. Um, let's see, what else? Do to do. Comments made on X. Deal made me hungry. Talking about Red Dye 3. Sorry, folks, but it is also breakfast time. I don't mean to make you hungry. Canned or frozen veggies may be better. No perfect solutions. Keith Garrett says that's correct. No perfect solutions. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is to learn how to read the ingredients, and it's not very hard. Like, if you pick up your, like, if I go and I go buy, if I go to buy frozen, say, broccoli, and I pick up the bag and I look on the ingredients list and it says broccoli, that's pretty clear. Like, they don't have any other ingredients in it. So I'm good to go there. But if I see like broccoli and a whole long list of other things, well, then I need to start reading. And it's simple. If let's say you're not familiar, you've not been a weirdo like me, and you've learned what many of these ingredients actually mean. If you don't immediately recognize something, put it back. There is so much food out there. You should be able to do that. Put it back. Take a picture of it. Go research it and just be like, all right, it says this on the, you know, I don't have anything within arm reach to look at, but you might look and say, oh, it says citric acid. What is that? Then just go Google it. Citric acid. Is it healthy for you? Spend 20 minutes reading and you'll find, oh, citric acid, probably okay. All right, good deal. I don't have to worry too much about citric acid anymore if I see that on my list. Right. Or maybe you decide it's not okay. Whatever. I mean, you can make a decision. You can read and maybe it says it's mostly okay, whatever it is, and that there might be concerns. And you can say, well, that's good enough for me to rule it out. Fair enough. But that's how you do it. It's not very difficult. Let's see what else we got here. Let's make sure there's no comments over on Facebook. Nope, I don't see any comments there. Well, I do. I don't think the government should ban Red 40 or TikTok. That Liberty Lady said over on Facebook. You're correct. We're not talking about TikTok today. That's a whole nother conversation. But indeed, the government should not be banning things. Let's see. Anything over there on X? Let me see if I can find. Where's my window for X? I think I closed it by accident. Nope. There it is. Okay. Oh no. I'm seeing. Oh, that's interesting. I just realized. Um. hmm, Looks like the comments from X do come over, so that's cool. Learn something new every day. Awesome. Well, let's get back to the show and let's continue talking about all this cool stuff. So, what do we got coming up next here? So, let's see here. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Do me a favor, folks. If you enjoy this show, be sure to hit the like and the subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. All right. So if you want to support the show, I want you to head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I will engage with supporters directly about the show, maybe topics, things that you want me to discuss, response videos, or maybe the format of the show. Those are the kind of things that we're going to talk about, anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only video. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. So if you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes for that will air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever is more convenient for our dads. Got to take care of our dads. All right, now let's get back to the show. So where does this put RFK and MAHA crowd? Where do they fit in? They don't. RFK announced his presidential bid in April of 2023. MAHA hadn't been born yet. Now, the petition that led to revoking authorization was submitted in October of 2022. So, like months prior, but an earlier in the prior year, months earlier and the prior year. Say that right. So, after 60 years of petitions and studies and provisional listings, right, the FDA decided to ban it or revoke the authorization. 60 years. 60 years of petitions, studies, and provisional listings. Think of all the people that consumed red dye number 3 for 60 years in whatever quantities, thinking, you know what? It's healthy. They're allowed to sell it to me. The government's on the job. They're taking care of things. Now, here's where the twist really happens. Many people may not realize that legislation to ban red dye 3 in California was signed by Governor Gavin Newsom also in October of 23. I think I said October of 22 earlier, right? Did I say that? Okay. So yeah, okay. So there's a couple things. There are a number of things happening. I'm just making sure I get my timeline correct here. So April of 2023, RFK announced his presidential bid. So there was no MAHA movement up until then, like no of the official MAHA. There was movement for, healthier foods and those kind of things, but there wasn't this specific MAHA movement at this time. But in October of 2022, that's when the petition that led to revoking the authorization was submitted. The one I just read, that was submitted in 2022. So the year prior. And then in October of 23, so months later after RFK Jr. announced his presidential bid, that's when Governor Gavin Newsom signed the ban in California. So let's take a look at that real quick. Let's see what we got here. Boom, boom. Moving some things around here real quick, and we will get it. Okay, so there we are. Boom, there it is. All right, so let me zoom in a little bit so that you can see it a little bit better. So let's take a look at what this says. California becomes the first state to ban 4 additives linked to disease. October 10, 2023 by NPR. California has become the first U.S. state to outlaw the use of 4 potentially harmful food and drink additives that have been linked to an array of diseases, including cancer, and are already banned in dozens of countries. The California Food Safety Act prohibits the manufacturing, distribution, and sale of food and beverages that contain brominated vegetable oil, potassium bromate, prop, propylparaben, pretty sure I didn't say that right, and red dye 3, which can be found in candy, fruit, juices, cookies, and more. Going down a little bit further, the law won't be implemented until 2027, which Newsom says will give companies enough time to revise their recipes to avoid these harmful chemicals in their products. Now, this ban that the FDA just implemented, do you recall what year it goes into effect? If you said 2027, go to the front of the class. So both of them, the one that Gavin Newsom signed, 2027, and the one that the FDA just revoked and said, hey, you've got the next 2 years to make this happen. Since everybody wants to talk about coincidence, is that a coincidence or what? Same year? Interesting. In addition to the EU, countries that have banned the 4 additives in food include the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, China, and Japan. A number of top brands, from Coke and Pepsi to Dunkin' and Panera, have voluntarily pulled the additives from their products. Oh, voluntarily? I'm kind of shocked. Like, wait a minute. Companies voluntarily do things without the government forcing them? Without the government saying, you better do this or else? That happens? That's amazing. Now, they were late to the scene too. Like, I'd have to go and look and find out the dates, but I suspect that they didn't do it 30 years ago. Just saying. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it. But they voluntarily removed it. Before Governor Gavin Newsom signed his bill, before the FDA revoked their authorization. Hmm. Do you find that interesting? I do. All right. Now, what's really interesting is this Delaney clause. The Delaney clause is basically it's just like a short little snippet that basically says if cancer if an additive can be found to cause cancer in humans or animals, you can't have it. That's it. That's the basis. That's what it is. That's all it says. And you might be inclined to think that this clause helps protect human health, but even there you would be wrong. First of all, think about how long it took. Like, we've had this Delaney clause since like 1938, something like that. We've had this Delaney clause for decades now. And yet it took decades for the FDA to say, you know what? This additive should be banned. In fact, the FDA was behind the free market, who said, we're going to voluntarily remove this. Now, it's possible that they've been watching and they said, hey, the FDA is going to ban this. Let's just go ahead and get ahead of the game, right? If it's going to be banned, maybe we do it first. And then when the news reports it, they say, oh, this company's already voluntarily done it. And so therefore we look better. That's possible. Possible that they just said, oh, we didn't realize that it was a bad chemical, so we're going to remove it. We'll find something else. And there's any number of reasons. I don't have access to that information. But back to this Delaney clause. No, it actually doesn't really help with human health, because here's an article from Science Direct talking. This is a regarding a study from 1996. So let's put this up on the screen here real quick, and hopefully hopefully you're getting something out of this show today. I know it's maybe a little bit dry, but let's take a look. This is the 37-year history. Let's do that. 37-year history of the Delaney clause. So this is, again, it was it comes from the Experimental and Toxicology Pathology Report, volume 48, issues 2 to 3, February of 1996. So it's very, very old. This little snippet here. 37-year history of the Delaney clause. So it's 37 years old in 1996. Here's what it says. The Delaney Clause has been part of the U.S. Food and Drug and Cosmetic laws since it was enacted by Congress in 1958. Okay, I said 38, I meant 58. It states that no cancer-causing agent, as demonstrated in humans or animals, shall be deliberately added to or found as a contaminant in food. That's important to note, because there are two situations that something can get in your food. Number one, it's put in there on purpose. Number two, it's a contaminant through the process of creating that food. And there are different tolerances for each one. So it can't be found. So they're saying, like, look, the Delaney clause says if it's been found to cause cancer, you can't add it in there on purpose, and it cannot even be a contaminant. There's no threshold for contamination that's acceptable. The FDA was charged with enforcing this clause. Other agencies, such as EPA, use similar approaches with the avowed aim to prevent cancer. Legal cases have been brought against agencies who failed to comply with this law to the letter. Since 1958, research has elucidated the main mechanism whereby chemicals cause cancer. The leading causative factors of major human cancers are basically known and include smoking and tobacco, excessive alcohol, commentary dietary practices, and nutritional traditions. The etiology of lymphomas, leukemias, and cervical cancer may be viruses. It's interesting. The Delaney Clause was designed to protect against these many cancer types. It was based on the hypothesis held in the 1950s that human cancers are due to environmental chemicals. Here's the good part. Here's the fun part. This is clearly not true for the great majority of cancers, and therefore the Delaney Clause, as framed, has not saved any lives. It is obsolete and should be eliminated. We have had our health in the hands of bureaucracy and laws that are not backed by science. So all this bureaucracy based on laws that require them to do certain things, and the laws are based on information that we once believed true, but have since found not to be true. That's what you get from government. So, what this means, again, your health has been in the hands of an overly bureaucratic government that takes, in some cases, decades to determine safety. So you could be consuming something for decades, thinking it's totally healthy because the government, while they're on the job, they're taking care of things, they're evaluating stuff. They are giving they're stamping and saying this is good or nope, this is not good. But and even when safety is determined to be compromised in one area, such as cosmetics, that same bureaucracy can cause delays in another relevant area, that is food. So cosmetics, they determined long ago, hey, you know what? Red dye number 3, no, you can't have it in there. But then decades later, we're still, looking at the issue of food. So why should we not celebrate this? Because I mean, it sounds like, hey, DL, you just kind of said like it can cause cancer. I don't want cancer, and I don't. You don't. Nobody wants cancer. Right? It's a terrible thing. Well, here's the thing. It's the reason we shouldn't celebrate this. It's a 60-year administrative nightmare that may not even be based on solid science. At a minimum, during that 60 years, millions of Americans were led to believe their food was safe. Think about that for a second. All this time, people have been thinking it's safe to eat. You go out and you get that candy corn. I think candy corn was once one of the uh, foods that had red dye 3. You go out and you eat I know everybody's like, no, who eats candy corn? But like you get my drift. Like there are candies out there that people were eating that had this dye in it. So imagine that people like this, like someone says, hey, this is my favorite candy, and they've been eating it for decades, while the government is trying to figure this out and say, well, it's provisionally okay until we see that it's not okay. Rather than maybe the flip side where they say, okay, with food, it is so important. Maybe it's provisionally not okay until we go through the process and use every available method, study, every bit of knowledge that we have to see if this causes cancer. And if we keep coming back with the answer is nope, doesn't cause cancer this way, doesn't cause cancer this way, doesn't cause cancer this way, right? It doesn't cause cancer in this amount or this amount or this amount, all the different variations, right? If it comes back after, so many studies and after so many decades, then we'll say, yep, this is a safe item because we just cannot find any way that this particular additive leads to cancer. That's how it should be, but that's not how it is. And the worst part about this is as long as the FDA has approved it, you have little recourse. So now enter in what's the libertarian answer? What do we do, DL? How do we solve this issue if we don't have an FDA, even if the FDA is behind on things? Even if we have to deal with bureaucracy, some bureaucracy is better than just letting everybody have at it, right? Like, what if we had no FDA? Then we might still be consuming red dye number 3 in large quantities. Well, go back to that study that I just showed you. So let me pull that up real quick. And I want to show you because I think it was very instructive. So let's go back up to the study, the top of this, not study, but the petition. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the top of the petition. Look at all of these names, this big, huge list of names. That's not all the list of names that are out there that are in some way concerned about human health. There are probably many others, probably thousands of organizations, big and small. But these are the ones that happen to get together and say, let's put in a petition and ask the FDA to ban this once and for all. So you have all of these watch groups that already exist on their own dime or from donations or whatever, right? They're already out there looking into this and saying, hey, we think the evidence says no on this. Well, the libertarian answer, isn't that we should just all consume stuff. And if you get cancer, you get cancer. That might be how people perceive it, but that's not the real answer. Because at its core, libertarianism doesn't say there are never any rules, there's never any recourse. What we say is the government is insufficient about being the one to make all of this happen. They are the ones that cause delays. They are the ones that get things wrong. They are the ones that allow money to play a role into whether or not something does or does not happen, is or is not banned, is or is not permitted. Like there are all these fundamental problems with government. And the thing is, the reason I did this episode, I wanted to show you how these problems play out. I wanted to give you a better idea rather than just say, "Hey, there are problems with the government. It's inefficient." Okay, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean is that it took decades to determine that something that was deemed is unsuitable for external use was unsuitable also for human use. And even then, it's questionable whether or not they really needed to do it. So all this time, one of two things has been happening. People have been potentially consuming this, putting themselves at increased risk of cancer, or the market has already spoken. People didn't really know much about it, right? They didn't hear much about it, about companies that were removing this or that additive. Most people don't know that. Like I didn't know until I dug down and went through this rabbit hole that some of these companies already voluntarily removed it. I was not aware of this. Okay. When I first heard it, I walked through my house and I looked at like all these, like any red object. Like I was like, oh, here's this kid's juice. And I looked at it and I said, nope, it's got like, beet juice coloring or something like that. Right. Like I looked at all the things already, and we're not a particularly snooty household, so like we've got some things in here that, maybe I shouldn't be eating or maybe we shouldn't have, depending on how you look at, food. But I went through and I looked at all these and I was like, all right, well, I don't see it already. So I was like, where is it? I'm not even sure. I could not tell you, go to the store, pick this item up. You're going to see that it says FD&C number 3. That's because it's not used nearly as much already. So we've been relying, one of two things. We've been consuming it, potentially putting ourselves at increased risk of cancer, or we're having this debate and we're getting all excited about how great the federal government is when they're not even the ones that helped lead to this, because they've been dragging their feet, offering provisional status after provisional status for decades. And in the free market, they just did their thing. But again, you had all these entities that were looking out and saying, hey, I think there's a problem here. So how do we have that translate to a libertarian society where we don't necessarily have a bureaucratic government? Well, I think number one, your government can just say, look, you need to be transparent with everything that you're putting in the food. And you need to do the research, and you need to put the research out there so that the public can review it. If you go work at like a factory or something like that, they will almost certainly introduce you to MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet. And they have one on every chemical. Go get your bottle of bleach and go look it up. There's an MSDS for it. And they will tell you everything you need to know regarding health, right? So the first answer is transparency. Make sure that the public has access to this information, especially now that we have the internet. Once upon a time before the internet, it might have been a little tougher ask. But today with the internet, like you could pull it up I did half of my research on my phone. From my phone, I learned most of everything I just told you. And today we like most everybody has a cell phone. So as long as you know, hey, I see this ingredient on my Fruit Loops. I'm not sure what it is. You should be able to go to the website and pull it up and then say, I want to know about this, this particular ingredient. What do you know about it? And then the company should have, that's a requirement that I would support. If you're going to sell something for human consumption, you have to let people be informed about what's in your product and what you know about the product. So if you've conducted some safety tests, then you need to put them out there. Then other groups, they can go out and perform other additional tests. So you could have some science group full of scientists that are funded through, I don't know, maybe they get donations, whatever. But they get their funding and they conduct tests and they say, "Hey, you know what? We found that this chemical, this additive that you have in your Fruit Loops." I'm sorry, Fruit Loops. I don't mean to be picking on you, but they might say, "Hey, we've got some concerns about this," and then they can publish it, and then the news media can say, "Hey, some new concerns have come out about this," and then the public can be aware. And then the next thing is liability. So if you know about something, if you know something has the potential to cause, say, cancer or some other health problem, and you don't disclose that information, then you should be held liable. So if your Fruit Loops, again, sorry, Fruit Loops, but if your Fruit Loops has something in it, and I loved it as a kid, and I just continued eating Fruit Loops every day, and then I end up getting a particular, say, cancer, and I can demonstrate that I ate, copious amounts of this. I ate it every day. And then I can demonstrate that you knew that there was a potential risk of cancer and you did not inform me, then you should be liable for that. And if other people had that same issue, then we should be able to come together and have a class action lawsuit. Because you know what makes companies listen very quickly? When they're going to lose money. The thought of losing money. And if they know that they can be sued out of existence, if they're caught using an ingredient that they knew could cause problems, health problems, the likelihood that they will continue to use it is extremely low. So there is a role for government from a libertarian perspective, but the role is not what it is right now. The role right now is we will tell you if it's acceptable in a year or 2 years or 60. We'll tell you. You may have went your whole life consuming this, putting yourself at increased risk for cancer or some other disease. But don't worry, we will eventually tell you. And you know what? Anybody that's got that can show, that can demonstrate they got cancer, possibly from red dye 3, let's just say that they could do that. Do they have any recourse? No. They currently have no. The FDA is not liable for that. Right? They can show like, "Hey, we had to do these new studies and we had to give them time to do these studies, blah, blah, blah." Right? They're gonna look and say, "Well, we followed our processes and our processes are designed to help determine whether or not these things are safe. So therefore, like, why would we be liable? We were doing our job. We did exactly what we were supposed to do." Right? So this is the problem. And the problem is there's not really good recourse for Americans when they've been deceived. That's the answer. The answer is, and libertarians know this term, informed consent. If you have informed consent, a proper setup for informed consent, then what ends up happening is that you have recourse against even a behemoth if they fail to inform you. Now, if they don't know, if nobody's been researching a particular additive, right, then that would, like, hey, we're telling you what we know. And what we know is that it seems like it's okay, right? Based on whatever. Maybe we didn't do any studies. We just put it in there. We said, it seems like it'll be all right. We had some chemists look at it and they liked the structure and they called it a day. Maybe, right? But again, it's all about informed consent because at the end of the day, a libertarian world would simply shift some of these things out of the government and into the private sector and then add transparency and liability as things that help ensure that you are protected. That's the answer. Transparency and liability. But at the end of the day, red dye number 3 wasn't in a lot of the stuff you were already eating anyway. There's no cause to celebrate because there's no evidence to show that MAHA or RFK Jr. had anything to do with this. But you can look and say Governor Gavin Newsom had more to do with it than they did. And nobody likes him anyway. I mean, nobody should. But he should get credit because at least he signed a bill in 23 saying, hey, let's ban this. This is a bad thing. We shouldn't have this in here. So it seems like California was leading the way, which is, I find a little bit funny. MAHA, all them bad liberals, they don't care about us, blah, blah, blah. And as it turns out, Gavin Newsom, the snake that he is, was more on the ball with your health than the FDA was. Go figure. All right, let's take a look at some last comments here, and then we'll close out the show here. All right, so let's see what else we got. Let me see here. Where's my little screen so that I can see what I've got going on here? All right, so there we go. Let's see. Cancer is not well understood, says Keith Garrett. That is correct. It is not well understood. From the people that insist puberty blockers are harmless. Whole nother can of worms there. But I will tell you this: if you're curious about whether or not puberty blockers are harmless, I want you to go and look up. There was a study done. There's a report. I think it came from the Kaiser Family Foundation, and they reported this several years ago that women who were put on puberty blockers as a child were having bone issues. Like one woman had to have her entire jaw reconstructed because like of the thinning of the bone and stuff like that. So go look that up because yes, they are not harmless. No pharmaceutical is entirely harmless. All right. Let's see. Marlene Marcus is looking for a faithful virtual friend. Sorry, Marlene, you're going to have to go and look elsewhere, pornbot. Let's see what else. I was told not to read that. Too late. I did. I read it. I knew what it said. I could see it. That's too funny. Sometimes you just got to fight the bots. That's just the way it works. They get in there and they want their 15 seconds of fame as well. So I gave that bot their little bit of fame. Anyway, time to close out the show, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become a part of my community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. It is a little bit different. It is libertydad.locals.com. I'll put everything in the show notes. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.